2022 Verona Board of Education public meeting. We're calling the meeting to order. It is 7:25. If everybody will please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The reading of the meeting notice. This meeting is being conducted in compliance with the open meeting session that the Verona Board of Education passed a resolution at its annual reorganization meeting held on January 4th, 2022. The meeting set forth the schedule of its regular meetings, which resolution was within 7 days of passage. The schedule was sent to the Verona Cedar Grove Times, the Star Ledger, the Township of Verona, and the VEA. Postings of this meeting setting forth the time, location, and agenda were posted at the Verona Board of Education office and on the Verona Public Schools District website. The Verona Board of Education operates under a consent agenda format. Any board member has the right to have an item pulled to be voted upon or discussed separately. Copies of tonight's agenda and resolutions have been made available to the public and the press. Mr. Cruz, can you do the roll call for attendance?
Sure. Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Dake?
Yes.
Mrs. Drappi?
Here.
Mrs. Prisco?
Here.
Mrs. Freshy?
Here.
We have quorum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have no presentations this evening, so we're going to go right to Ms. Di Giuseppe and the superintendent report.
And my report will be fairly short today. It hasn't been that long since we met last time. But I do want to say we are just about finished with our back to school nights in person this year. Everyone seems to be excited. We have HBW, FM Brown, and the high school are remaining. And they've been very well attended. And it's been great listening to the various building principals kind of talk about their buildings and to see what the SCAs are doing and the VFI. I got to see Mr. Rampola and I got to meet Miss, what is Yvette's last name? McNeil. I got to meet Mrs. McNeil. All exciting for the new superintendent to get to meet these people. The other
Tired and they all come back. They miss us so much.
They are, they're certainly very, very, very indebted to the school district that they're giving their time so freely. It's nice to see. The other, I guess the other big news that we're really embarking on in the board tonight was the first recipient of a new HIB investigation process that we're implementing, partly because the law has changed a little bit and partly because we were pretty, a little behind the times with regard to the way the process was handled here. So hopefully the streamlining will be better for our students, our parents, and our staff. And anyone that would like to know that process, it is on the website under parents and then HIB. There's new forms that we are required to use by the Department of Education, as well as an overview of the HIB process and a timeline, which is really helpful. To see, what the timeline is supposed to look like and to make sure we stay on track. So I know we have some committee reports, so I'm going to leave the committee information to the board members. So that's my report for this evening. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. That's really good to hear that we're streamlining our process and have it up on the website, because I do think the website is something that we've discussed and need to start addressing in bits and pieces to get that more unified and a cleaner, easier for our users.
Yes, it's definitely something that needs a lot of tender love and care.
Yeah. So to that end, we haven't had a community resource meeting, so we can try and work and get one of those onto our agenda, because that's kind of where that website discussions happened in the past. Doesn't necessarily have to stay there, but for now, I think it would be a good venue.
This week is kind of hectic, but next week I have several evenings open or afternoons, wherever you want to, if you'd like to get.
And it's
something on the
Mrs.
calendar.
Prisco and myself,
Okay,
so you
so
can
we'll
send
get-
us out
okay,
an
I'll send you an email.
email and we'll get a mutually convenient time for us.
Great,
Perfect.
thank you.
And then the committee reports, athletics, I did not make the meeting. Mrs. Prisco. Oh, I'm sorry. I always skip your report. I'm
Jorge,
sorry, Jorge.
yay.
All right. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Day.
Good evening, everyone. I just have a few updates for my report tonight. In finance, we have our July 2022 board secretary, treasurers, and budget transfer report, and they're all in agreement. Next week, we'll be working closely with our auditors on the 2021-22 financial review, and we look forward to the presentation of the report before the end of this calendar year. One of the things I just want to encourage families on is the free and reduced lunch applications for those who do qualify. Please do submit those applications by this Friday, September 30th. This is actually our last week of collecting applications. We will continue collecting applications for new registrations and any hardship situations. On the referendum side, we have resolution number 20. It's a recommendation to the board for additional referendum related projects that we would like to ensure that the allocation of funds be allocated to. So I just want to highlight that. And lastly, we reached a decision for our banking service request for proposal, or RFP. The committee has made the recommendation to have Investors Bank for an extension of 3 years. We look forward to the revised agreement with investors, which will generate an additional interest revenue of approximately $80,000 annually. This concludes my report for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. I'm sorry for skipping you. So committee reports, athletics, I was not able to make it. It was Mrs. Prisco and Mr. Waka stepped in for me. So I will turn it over to them.
I could report on it if you want. It was a pretty quick meeting. Obviously, fall sports are still up and running. Everything is going well. Believe it or not, the tennis team already had their county tournament. So fall's like in the middle of its season, which is so crazy how fast everything is going. I would like to thank Mrs. Pomerezi, though, because she's really working very hard, making sure that our students get to and from all the sporting events with the bus shortages that we've had and the problems. She's working very closely with Vanderhoof, Bel Air, and Mayor companies. So to make sure that when we don't have the school buses in line, she can get them for our students. So thank you to her efforts on doing all of that. She's also working on the positive, we've talked about this, bringing back the Positive Coaches Alliance. And also discussed about anti-hazing and anti-bullying workshop for the student athletes, as well as coaches, and also discussed sideline behaviors for amongst parents as well, doing some kind of maybe workshops. We're approving tonight, I believe it's resolution number 4.4, a field trip for this Spanish club to go to Hudson Yards on October 13th with Senorita Yusechi. And I think that's about 45 students from VHS, 10th and 11th graders. And I believe, Mr. Waka, did I miss anything or?
No, I think you got it all. I think it was a good meeting.
Thank you.
Question regarding the buses. I know we have new buses and everything else, but I think one of the challenges was bus drivers, the shortage. And I know, didn't the state change the rules, the regulations? Did that go into effect? So the certification's a little bit easier to get and without having to be an auto mechanic or something to be a bus driver. Okay. Got it. Okay, thanks.
And I think, didn't we discuss one of the coaches, I think Mr. Brown, who was going to get certified, or he is certified, who would be able to step in if needed?
Yeah, he's either currently certified or in the process of getting
He's
certified.
still in the process of it. Yeah, so that should help a bit as well. So that's great. All right, thank you. Athletics. Did facilities meet?
We did. We had a pretty big meeting. The agenda that's in the folder has a lot of links on it, so it is best viewed on your computer. All right, let's see, where do we start? So, there's been, we've been talking about installing a foul ball net for quite some time behind the softball field down on the lower field. And he received several quotes for the foul ball net, and as it stands right now, the lowest quote is still, we believe, a little bit too much. I believe the quote came in at, I'm sorry, I'm just going to pull it up really quick. I believe it came in at just under 100,000. Is that correct, Mr. Cruz?
92,000.
I'm sorry?
92,000.
92,000, thank you. And in discussion in our committee, we just felt that those funds could be better used to all of our students and our facilities. And it was something that we would be able to use through a referendum funds that we have in excess, but we just felt that it could be better used and impact a greater number of students. So we took it off of the agenda as part of as part of resolution 20.
But it is still being discussed, so.
Right, it's
not-
still in discussion, so it's not like a done deal. We still want to see what some other options are going forward. Joel Martin provided a lot of our district signage, especially talking about town codes regarding playground usage. And they were installed in-house using our in-house guys, so thank you for that. Let's see, the swing sets were inspected over the summer and we are waiting on repair proposals. And the vendor's trying to secure those replacement parts, and we'll get a proposal once those parts are secured. We had, and you can see on resolution 20, there are quite a few sort of repairs and additional items that we were able to use the additional referendum funding for. The stormwater drain jetting was done because when we installed the HVAC and the town did the inspection, they realized that our condensers were not draining into the stormwater drains. So in order to make sure that that was doable, we had to jet all the stormwater drains. And once we did that, we found some repairs that were really in need that could have caused some major problems going down the line. And I know Mr. Naturale is working on sort of a schedule to do that over the course of the year, annually, biannually, as needed, depending on the recommendations, to make sure that those lines remain clean and that they remain in good repair. We received proposals for the architect. And the committee is, the evaluation scoring was concluded and they are working on a decision to recommend to the board. And let's see. A lot of the other referendum work on resolution number 20 are also things that had to be done this summer. Sort of issues that were found and needed to be addressed immediately. And again, we were able to use the excess referendum funding for that. And then anything else that I missed? Oh, the PO was created to repair the wall at Forest, and we're hoping to get started on that as soon as possible. And oh, in terms of the stormwater management, so we did receive some competitive quotes. And right now, Mr. Naturale is working with the DPW and the principals and Mr. Freund and Mr. Monticelli, right? It was at Forest that they found the biggest issues, and we're looking for to get those repairs done as soon as possible. And I think that's also in a number 20. So I think that was it. Did I miss anything, Mr. Day?
All right, thank you. I think you got it all.
Okay.
Any questions?
We did, oh, one extra thing. We
No, you're
did.
done. You're done.
No,
Okay, go ahead.
no, because this is important because this is a resolution, so please.
Okay, this one time.
Deep breaths.
Come on, now you're wasting time.
I know Mr. Naturelli is recommended to the board the addition for a custodial coordinator and a facilities coordinator as well. And I mean, that's a resolution. I'm just looking for that resolution. Oh, I went too far. Oh, and I circled it too. It's right here. Number 9. There it is. And I guess that's something that we can talk about when we talk about the resolutions.
And I just want to say, I know Mr. Naturelli's only been here for a couple months, but he's a whirlwind right now. He's going after everything in the district that he can look at, and with the staff, and trying to find out what needs to be repaired, what needs to be adjusted, what we need to tweak, and whether we take care of it now or we have it on our to-do list. But we need to do that continuously to keep this district, in the facilities up to snuff, and make sure that there's safety issues and any other items that pop up we're aware of before. We don't want any surprises. So yeah, so I want to thank him for going to bat, and Jorge's making sure that we can afford all these things that he's talking about. Mr. Cruz, sorry, I don't mean to call you by your first name.
So if there's, excuse me, if there's no questions from anybody, we're going to move on to Finance Committee. Did Finance meet?
Happy to do the finance report. I think the big thing was the banking thing. I love how, we got a certain rate from Investors Bank, and then we said, well, we're going to go somewhere else, and they came back with a better rate, $80,000 as a result, net gain for the district. So Jorge, good job with that. Anything else that you think we should talk about or highlight in the finance report, since you did a good job organizing that meeting?
Good volley.
Sure. So one of the things that that we highlighted was last week we had our wellness day for our staff, which was actually our first wellness day, and it was a great turnout. So it was awesome to just participate, get glucose and cholesterol screening and blood pressure, and then kind of like focusing on the well-being of our staff, and it's so important. So I think that's something that we will definitely want to continue going forward in future years, and make it an annual thing, and really highlight that to our staff. Besides the banking RFP, we talked about the sale of the old school bus. So that's actually going to be done through the Hunterdon County ESC co-op. And they do charge a 10% fee, but in our agreement, we're putting that fee on the buyer. So whoever is actually the highest bidder, they will be covering the 10% fee that is associated with the advertisement and the bidding of that school bus. So that's one of the resolutions tonight for approval under finance. And then the other one was about the large school bus. So it's waiting for DMV inspection. So we're hoping that in the next week we'll have that school bus, the large school bus, delivered. So that's the last update for that one. And the other ones were collections and then the residency review. So that we did approve TSI for. We're proposing TSI for collection, so I'm going to collect on any outstanding accounts receivables to the board. So whenever there's actually anything outstanding, this will be the firm which is rare that this happens, but will be the firm that will do the collections on behalf of the board. And the last one was a residency review. So we have True Review, which is a proposal, and this will be a proactive review of our residency to ensure that the students that we have in our school district reside in our district. So this is kind of like a very proactive approach of kind of like doing the residency review from our end, and we'll continue building on that internally.
Does anybody have any questions,
I
Mrs.
do.
Sharkey?
Who was doing our residency review prior to hiring A firm?
So prior to that was Dr. Mariello. So he was receiving a stipend.
Mhm.
At the time, the residency piece was only done as a reactive approach of
Mhm.
if
Right.
someone actually heard something and if the school actually heard of so-and-so is actually, using grandma's address and they live in Cedar Grove or they live in West Caldwell, et cetera. And that's the only way that we would actually begin the investigation process.
And
Okay, go ahead.
I just say, I fully support doing this residential review. Being on the board for 9 years, this has come up multiple times. We've always thought of different ways to handle it. It wasn't that big of an issue, but I think it's becoming bigger and bigger. Just the fact of the growth of Verona, the fact that a lot of these school classroom sizes are getting larger, and the fact we have a lot of construction starting up, that's going to bring in potentially more students. So we need to make sure that the students that are being taught in our district live in our district. And if they don't live in our district, then they have to make sure they're paying the tuition. If we allow them to come in based off the number
Yeah,
of students we have in the, district. So, but I do appreciate you going to bat and finding a company that will do the review for us proactively. So.
I think along that vein too, and Ms. Di Giuseppe, I don't know if you're aware or not, but we had talked about in the past and it never came to fruition. We kind of got side railed with priorities, was having different points of registration because as it stood, it was kindergarten and then you were good right through 12th grade. So they were talking about at each level. So you would do kindergarten and then maybe the transition into 5th grade and then again into high school, showing proof of residency. So I don't know if that's something that's on anybody's radar, but it was discussed.
It actually is, and I think we're working now because Genesis actually can do online registration, which would be move us into the 21st century. But just because the parent puts information into an online portal doesn't mean it's not they're not living with an aunt or a cousin in town. So somebody still does have to do that legwork to run that down. But having multiple checkpoints throughout the year, I know if it's a rental situation, we do require an updated lease if it's a 3-year lease, at the end of that 3-year lease, we require that. But again, people move about and while they have to change their address, if it's a situation where they're flying under the radar to keep their kids in Verona schools, then that's not as easy to just naturally see. Generally, to be honest with you, the kids out their families generally.
Yeah,
They do.
accidentally. They
Accidentally,
say
they'll
something that
about my
gives
new
something
house.
away. Yeah.
And that's kind of where it comes from. But this idea that this firm is going to do kind of an overview, one-time look is actually very helpful. I know they've saved other districts large sums of money when they come across incidents when you have 2,200 families, or not families, but students in the district.
Yeah.
It's a good practice to do once in a while. Certainly you don't do it every month, but
So when I'm looking at their scope of service, I don't see anything. I see like a service schedule and a lot of it is like as needed. So are we going to sign them up to do like an annual, like every year, biannual, and then an as needed residency check?
I would suggest every other year. I don't think it's necessary to do every year, every
Okay.
other, every third year, but they do provide services such as private investigator services.
Yeah, no, I saw that, but I guess what I don't see on here is like this like overview, like how much is that going to cost for like every other year for them to do
$3 per student.
Oh, is that what that
That's
was?
the number that we have,
Okay.
yeah.
So the $3 per student is the address lookup. So this is the
Incorrect
pro.
address indicator, right?
Right.
Is that what
So
they're
this
saying?
is
Okay.
this is actually the preliminary review of kind of like a data dump of looking at every single
Got
resident that's actually submitted and making the connection whether that family does reside in that address.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of like the first level, like a kind of like a tier 1. Then let's say 20. It comes back with 20 names that are kind of like red flags. Then that will be like the tier 2, whether we do that internally or if we say, you know what, it's only 5 that has an issue. Do we want to actually hire them to actually do the legwork, or do we have the bandwidth internally to actually do it ourselves if it's a handful?
Okay, so we're not
and going
bound
from
to
there.
use their services if
No.
they find someone.
No,
Okay.
so I think that when Diana and I, we discussed this, we basically said, okay, you know what, let's actually start with this
Okay.
and go from there and see
See
where we go, whether we could actually take it on inside or,
Okay.
but to your point, yes, I think looking at the rest of the proposal, it is pricey if you're talking about them doing the actual investigation
Yeah.
and going for it. If there's a unique situation where we being like, okay, you know, in this circumstance, we do need to do a proper investigation,
Okay.
then we could go that route.
And this comes out of general fund.
And it would be
So are we
general
looking to
operating.
start this next year and add this to our budget for next year,
year.
not this year?
Correct. So,
Okay.
so this will, the preliminary review, we could actually do now.
Yeah, I'm doing it now.
But we'll definitely build this into our budget for next year for an ongoing residency investigation and have a budget for it.
Most things don't require a private eye. They really don't,
Yeah.
but there are those cases that you really do need to send someone out to verify.
Okay, thank you.
And then in regard to Genesis being able to handle some of this, is it a situation where when you're putting in your information, then it'll say upload a document that you're showing your, okay, I like that. Okay, was there anything else on questions regarding finance or any of these things? So if not, we're going to open right now to public comments on agenda action items. So anything that we're planning on voting on tonight in the resolutions, you could come up to speak. And just please state your name for the record, and it's a 3-minute time limit per person.
No problem. Hi, Denise Frizella, 130 Personette Avenue. I just have a question on addendum item 3, the emergency virtual and remote instruction program. What is that? And when is it going to affect? Thanks.
So good question. The Department of Education, and I was going to say in their infinite wisdom, but I'll say it facetiously, has required that all school districts in New Jersey put together for the second year in a row an emergency virtual learning plan in case of a health emergency should arise, and they put us back into virtual learning. Now, given that the state last December and January were averaging 35,000 new COVID cases per day in New Jersey, and we didn't go all virtual, we're down around 2,000 now. I don't think we're, unless something, and I don't want to say it out loud, because yeah, I mean, I can't imagine a situation where the governor or the Department of Health would require schools to go back to an all virtual, but there are other mitigation strategies that would be employed before that drastic option. But we did have to have one, and it's due on September 30th.
Now, this is also, and I'm not suggesting that this is best practice for anybody bites my head off, but this would also allow a district to go virtual or remote instruction if there was like an emergency weather day. Does that work?
I'm glad you brought that up. The governor finally weighed in on that. No, we are not allowed to do. There was a bunch of people petitioning the legislature and the governor's office to allow us to use virtual learning as a way to protect, if you will, spring breaks, because a lot of districts will say you have 3 days built in. Anything over and above either come off the end of the school year or come off spring break. Most districts that are K-12 that have, a project graduation that can't be changed, kind of can't move graduation, so they're stuck with taking days out of spring break. At 2 weeks ago at the convocation, Dr. Alan McMillan did indicate that the answer is in, and schools are not allowed to use virtual days for weather emergencies. And I know there's a bunch of kids out there
That'll
right
make the
now.
students happy. I was saying they have, now they can have snow days again. Snow days still, yes.
Snow days. Well, this would have been, you have to exhaust what snow days you have
Right.
built in, but anything over and above that 3 or 4 built in, whatever you have,
You could use.
you could use virtual learning. And they're saying no go on that.
It's not only snow days now, it's any emergency weather days because flooding is very real. So good. Yay.
Thank you. Thank you for the question and the answer. Is there any other public comment on agenda items? So if not, we're going to close public portion on agenda items. And we're going to move on to discussion items for old and new business. I just have two quick things. Our second October meeting conflicts with the New Jersey School Board's workshop. So myself, Ms. Di Giuseppe, Mrs. Drappi, and Mr. Waka are all going to be at, oh, and Mr. Cruz as well. Oh, and Mrs. Prisco. So therefore, we do not have enough people for a board meeting. So we are going to change the date. The original date is, should be Tuesday, October 24th. We're going to move it to Thursday, October 27th. And we'll announce that again, as our next meeting comes up, and we'll put out a notification to the community. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. And then I did get an email from the Environmental Commission, and they asked to please put out there that Walk to School Day, which frankly in Verona should be every day. But we do have an official Walk to School Day in October. It's generally the first Wednesday in October. This year it will be October 12th, the second Wednesday. There was a conflict on the 5th. So please have your children walk to school. And my personal opinion is we have such great local neighborhood schools. So I think everybody should be walking whenever possible. Does anybody else have any old or new business that they want to?
Yeah, I just have one thing. Mr. Cruz, in advance of our next confidential, can you get the board a report of, we looked at a couple different, firms today, but based on the straw poll, which is an official, it appears that, 7 entities gave their opinion on how they'd rank. But there's only 5 board members, right? And certain positions are the board's attorney or the board's this. So I'd like the board to know what just the other fellow board members, how they ranked it and where the scores sit before our next board meeting, just with the board. I think that we certainly want the superintendent and the BA's opinion, but she has her own attorney, and I'm sure you do as well through your association. So I want to see what just we think.
Yeah, and just for public clarification, we've discussed several times about looking at and getting on a schedule with our services, professional services that we use, auditors, district architect, physician, our insurance brokers, the bank was one of them. So this evening we met with Mr. Cruz, put out an RFP for attorneys, and we did interview 3 different firms for that. So that's going to be a board decision on who we move forward with. So just to clarify on that. So thank you, Mr. Waka. Is there anything else? All right, so from that, we are going to move on to a roll call for our resolutions. And I need a motion to accept resolutions number 1 through 20.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Day.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Prisco. And is there any discussion on any of those items?
Can we vote on resolution number 3 separately?
Yeah, I was going to ask that as well, because
Okay.
let's just, before we pull it out separately.
Okay.
I just want to know which version we're voting on with that.
The one that's in the folder.
There were 2.
PDF in the folder, because I realized that Mrs. Slabursky doesn't, when I send her a document, she makes it into a PDF before she uploads it, which
Oh.
doesn't give you the most live version of it. So I put the link to the Word document in there, or the Google
Yeah, the
document.
Word document. Oh, it was in here. Yeah, it's in here.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I have to look then and see which one is in there.
So
because-
do you want me to read it?
Well,
I
so
can read it.
the last meeting, when we did for the first reading, we removed a whole paragraph that said that it needed to be within, it could not be within somebody's lifetime.
Right. So that was added back in here.
So the version we're voting on tonight has that language back in there.
That is the only change from the last reading.
Okay,
Is that language is back in
But a
here?
new one came that didn't have that in there. I just saw the one that came in that was sent.
Right. So what Ms. Di Giuseppe had Oh, no. So the PDF is right there.
It is. The PDF was in there. When I realized it
But
was
has
up,
that in there.
when it was the PDF and not a live document that would show changes, I added the live document.
Right, so the documents are the same, but the live document had the blue writing to show that that had been added back in.
So we're voting on the live version with that language added back in.
With the language in
Why
blue
was
added
that, why
back.
was it added back in?
Because one of our board members made the suggestion and no one else made a suggestion not to have it.
Yeah, so I would advocate we have the language that you can be alive and still get the award, but just have that formal process. I think that's the wisest way to do this.
But I think that's why we removed it last time, right? Is because.
So if we have
we
it
had
back
talked about that.
in, then if you're not in favor of it, then you would vote no.
Right. That's why I want to vote on it separately. Well, not why, but that's.
Yeah,
why we
so we're
should vote on
gonna
it
vote
separately.
on number 3 separately.
So number 3 says you have to be alive or you gotta be dead. What's it?
Says you need to be deceased.
You gotta be dead. Okay.
Not, will, or another person will be considered for memos. Oh, no employee or officer of Board of Education, student community member, local, state, national, international public figure, another person will be considered for memorializing a school building, room, or structure named during the individual's lifetime. So I'm
Yeah.
saying not during the individual's lifetime.
Yeah, and just so the public has like a little bit of a, history, the original first reading was back on April 26th of 2022. And that one read that the honoree shall be deceased for at least 10 years before being considered. So that was stricken. And then we came to another version, which was May 10th of 2022, which added in the language of it should not be during somebody's lifetime. And then last meeting, that was taken out, and now that's being put back in. So I voted no last meeting when it was in there that it would, when that language was removed, I voted no based on in my experience and reading headlines, that as long as somebody is alive, the opportunity for any kind of scandal or something to go wrong exists, because even the most detailed vetting process is only as good as the end of that day that
Brett
vetting
Favre
process
this
is
weekend.
done.
Brett Favre this weekend, something came out.
Yeah, that, and I mean, we mentioned last time the Mario Cuomo Bridge. I started like looking back and we saw the Lance Armstrong Fitness Center and the Joe Paterno,
Childhood
Child
Center.
Development Center. So my bias is not to have it in a lifetime. So we're gonna vote on that one separately. And that language is back in there for the vote, just so everybody's clear.
And did the board president change that language or the superintendent?
I took, the board president emailed me and I added that language back
Very
in.
good.
But
It's your agenda. So I just want to know how that change came about.
yeah, Lisa sent me, sorry,
That's
Trustee sent
okay.
me
Mhm.
an email over the weekend.
Can we get a heads up next time? There might be a change.
I
Oh, you
sent
sent us some
I did,
today. All right,
yeah, I
very good.
did.
Okay,
Yeah,
very good. I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's okay.
And is there any other resolutions before we vote? So Mr. Cruz, if you could do the roll call on,
Sorry, yes.
oh,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I do, yes. I wanted to, can we talk about the resolution number 9? So the district facilities coordinator and the district custodian coordinator. It was pretty obvious to me how the district custodian coordinator was very different from the director of facilities, right? They're very different responsibilities, but it wasn't entirely clear to me how the district facilities coordinator is different from the director of facilities, other than like the qualifications that you need to have and the certifications that you need to have. So can someone sort of outline that for me? Because they're on the same resolution where I feel like they should be a separate resolution each, because there's 2 different positions. Does that make sense?
I'm gonna defer to Mr. Cruz.
Okay.
Only because this is an existing position in the district and I know they were working on new job descriptions.
Right. And we did talk about it really briefly at the facilities meeting, but I think you guys were sort of talking about that as like, I came in late, so maybe I just missed that. But I know we spent most of that meeting talking about a lot of that referendum work. So if you can just sort of outline that for me so I have a better understanding. And is it possible to split those? Because those are two different positions, right? And those are two different, monetary units that we have to then fund. So I would like to know if we can split those up into two resolutions.
So the resolution, just to clarify, the resolution is actually the revision
Just
of
for the
the
job
job
description. Yeah, that's all. It was. just
It
changing.
is.
Yeah.
um,
They're all
Okay.
existing positions that they're
They-
just updating the job description.
Yes, you're right. I'm so sorry about
Right.
that.
and they are part of the VEA contract
Yeah.
for another year. So it would be
Yeah.
this school year and one more year. At that point, that could be something that we could discuss in the 24-25 school year.
Okay.
But
So okay, I misunderstood. My apologies for wasting everyone's time.
No, it's not a waste of
No, no.
time because it is.
Well, no, I
something-
mean, like,
yeah.
that was
But-
I should have read
yeah.
that more carefully.
And in
I'm
the
sorry
folder,
about that.
in the folder, both job descriptions are
Yes,
listed.
no,
there.
and that's what I was saying, like, the facilities coordinator position, it just seems like a
So-
lot of what our director does.
so there, just to kind of like confirm what you're saying, the what is it? The district facilities coordinator. This is actually an approach that Mr. Naturali is actually trying to implement within his department to create more bandwidth to cover more ground. And it's also to elevate kind of like a middle management opportunity. Right now, maintenance and custodial, the only thing in the custodial side, the only growth you have is head custodian. So having the coordinator position actually gives them something to look forward to.
Career path.
And it's not a guaranteed year over year. So every year they will have to reapply. And it's a stipend that is actually given. In addition to that, the one change that we actually made sure that we included in here is that the candidate had to be available to put in additional hours above the contractual time. So it's not work that they could do during their regular work day. This will be additional work that they will have to do above and beyond their day and not get overtime for it. So normally they will actually put in for overtime for anything above the contractual time. Working under this posting, this position, they won't qualify for any overtime payment. This will be a stipend. And at this time of year, it will be prorated. So the stipend won't be for the full year. It'll be, this will be posted and it'll probably take us a month to vet and actually start interviewing.
The stipend
internally.
is fairly sizable though.
Yes, it's $11,000.
$11,000.
Yeah. You're welcome.
That's really good because that was updating our job descriptions was something that we had begun as well because a lot of them were antiquated. So thank you for being on that. Okay, so let's, Mr. Cruz, call the roll to accept resolutions. No.
I didn't say a word. I didn't say a word.
Ms. Di Giuseppe, can you explain 4.3? This is a tremendous amount of people that we're sending to Crisis Intervention Institute training. And I'm sure it's really important, but I would like to know more about it before I approve it.
You know, it's interesting because I tried to find out more about it as well. This was all planned prior to my coming on. It was something Mr. Muriello planned, Dr. Muriello, sorry, planned prior to his leave, and it never got approved, and it happened. Yeah, they already did it on September 1.
These are all aides, correct?
They're aides, yes, aides and paras, and I believe,
Yeah, they have to do a certain amount of
Yeah.
Right.
handle with care.
I was
or
just gonna say, is
hours.
this like handle with care?
Yeah.
Is that what this is?
yes, it's handled with
Ah.
care. Yeah,
Okay, this is
yeah,
required.
yes, it's required, but it wasn't, it was,
That's all I need to
it's
know.
already,
Okay.
yes. We,
That's well, because it says crisis intervention. I'm like, is that de-escalate? Is like that what they're talking about? It's like de-escalation. and handle
CIT,
with care.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd always heard it as handled with care as well.
Right,
It's just a
but I
different
think-
provider. Yeah.
Thank you.
Handle
Okay.
extra care.
Mr. Cruz. Please do the roll call to vote on the approvals of resolutions number 1 through 20, excluding number 3.
So resolutions 1, 2, 4 through 20. Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mrs. Drappi,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mrs. Freshy.
Yes.
We have quorum. Motion passed.
Okay, great. So I need a motion to approve resolution number 3. Move it.
So move.
So resolution number 3 is moved by Mrs. Drappi. I need a second. Second by Mrs. Prisco. And is there further discussion regarding that? If not, Mr. Cruz, can you please do the roll call?
Resolution number 3, Mr. Walker,
No.
Mr. Day,
No.
Mrs. Drappi,
No.
Mrs. Prisco,
No.
Mrs. Freshy.
Yes.
Motion failed.
Okay, and then we move on to our addenda resolutions. I need a motion to approve resolution number 1 through 5.
So moved.
All right, moved by Mrs. Drappi,
Second.
second by Mr. Day. Is there any discussion on the addenda resolution?
Mrs. Petronico is on here
I know.
as resolution number 1 for retirement. She has taken care of my babies for many years at Lanning, and we have a Nutley connection, and I wish her all the best, and she will be missed for sure. I know we still have her for a few months, but
Yeah. Big shoes to fill.
Best-
She took
best of
care,
luck.
she took care of my babies up at Forest
Yes.
Avenue School. So she is an institution within our institution here. So to Mrs. Petronico, good luck and you will be missed.
She will. I mean, I've
Absolutely.
worked with
It's
her
amazing.
for a very short period of time, but I've been working with the nurses very closely, and you have a great group of nurses, and she's just wonderful. Yeah.
And if there is no further discussion, Mr. Cruz, can you do the roll call to vote?
Sure. Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mrs. Drappi,
yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mrs. Freshy.
Yes.
We have quorum. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And at this point, we could open up to public comment on absolutely any topic.
Two
I
today.
It's great to have somebody in the audience. I love it.
Did I have to sit back down, spin around and come back up? Okay. Denise Frizella, 130 Personette Avenue. First one is about VOTEC. This has been a conversation that has happened a couple times. I have 2 kids in the 8th grade, want to give them all the opportunities that I can, said, let's go look at the VOTEC, have no idea how to do this, called up guidance or emailed guidance in 8th grade. Hey, how can I get information about VOTEC? That was 2 weeks ago. Although the guidance counselor has gotten back to me and said, I am looking into it. I mean, the 8th grade guidance counselor didn't know who to contact to get information about VOTEC. That's an issue. VOTEC in Essex County has some incredible programs. It's something we should be talking to our students about in general education as well as special education. I think when I've spoken to Dr. Moriello about this before he left, he's like, oh yeah, we only have like 2 or 3 kids that go to the special education split day with VOTEC. And I'm like, well, why is that? Like, why is that? We're missing a whole opportunity for kids who may not want to go to college or may want to go to college. My husband went to, it wasn't VOTEC, but it was like engineering stuff in his high school. They had a VOTEC type thing in his high school, and now he builds bridges and tunnel. I don't even know what he does, but I can't keep track. But you know, like LaGuardia, that's what he built that. So like it can lead to really lucrative, great careers to people who want to go to college or don't want to go to college. So it's an avenue that I think we're missing. And then in addition, in terms of the free lunch program, sorry, Mr. Cruz, the governor increased the amount that people can earn to qualify for free lunch. It went from 185% of poverty level to 200% of poverty level. One is this Verona families able to access this increase, because I'm sure there's probably a few that fall within that category. Also, what is the estimated cost if they are able to access this increase, and how has this information gone out to the community? I have not received anything about this increase. I received something at the beginning of the year saying, hey, you can apply. So how has this gone out to the community? And that's it. Hopefully that wasn't too painful. Thanks.
To respond to the first part, but the VOTEC, I agree with you. You know, VOTECs they offer a lot of value. But when you ask the question why, and I do think we should, you know, we should promote it as a viable option. But the why to this question is that public school districts across the state are afraid to death of county VOTECs, because public school districts will send their kid to the county VOTEC school at the price determined by the county VOTEC. And in some counties, they've wreaked havoc on local district school budgets. But I agree with you philosophically, that shouldn't be something a child should be concerned with, or something that a counselor should, we should have that information more readily available. But it's going to be an uphill battle statewide to, because in certain counties, the VOTECs have become so big and powerful that now they control almost more than the local district as far as finance. But I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm going to jump onto that as well, because that is a conversation that we've had multiple times about creating these pathways and getting the information out to parents. And if I recall correctly, in the past, we did have a student who did the VOTEC program for hair salon and went on to college and used her certificate to cut hair while she was in college, funding her college tuition. So to your point, it's for everybody. It's for kids who want to explore different pathways. So we are definitely, it's on the radar. We've discussed it. And, and this is not the voice of the board. My personal bias is on my social media posts. Whenever I hear anything that are opportunities for students that are different schools, off the beaten trail, vocational schools, technical schools, opportunities for scholarships or even competitions. I really try my best to push that out there to, for parents to see and hear, because it's definitely, one flavor is not for everybody. So we're on that.
I mean, to Mrs. Fresky's point is that this is, and I know Ms. Verzelli, you said that, this is something we've talked about every now and then, but it really is something that has come up in my 3 years on this board. It has come up often. And I know for a fact that we've talked about at meetings, we've had discussions about how do we bring this down to the middle school level so kids can start on a career pathway earlier. A lot of people get scared when they hear of 8th graders thinking about a potential career, but if mechanics is your career, then that should be your pathway through the public school system. So, and, we have a fairly new director of school counseling, Mrs. Ackerman, who has a very strong vocational background. That's where she lived and breathed for 15 years prior to coming to this district. And, any change that is made, it does take time. It takes time to filter through, and it takes time to sort of change. And I think, as this sort of goes back to this climate and culture piece as well, when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, kids for whom 4-year colleges are either not an option or just not appropriate for them, this is part of that inclusivity. It's not just students in our special services program. These are all of our students can benefit from a robust vocational opportunity.
Right. And to your point, we should be working with our 6th and 7th graders specifically on preparation for what they're going to choose, what pathway they don't have to be locked into it, obviously, but encouraging them to do interest surveys and showing them what the prerequisites are for specific pathways, right? I mean, if you're not, and I'm going to go to the opposite end, but if you're not in a certain level of mathematics by the time you're in 8th grade, it becomes very difficult to get to the all empowering calculus level, which is a, but no, but that is a focus, that we hear a lot, right? So, but also I do think Mrs. Ackerman has her finger on the pulse of what needs to be done with getting our counseling department a true K-12 program versus a high school guidance program and a middle school counseling program. It should be a continuum of services that are connected.
So just to respond regarding the the actual school lunch eligibility. So what we go by is the USDA eligibility criteria. So what we shared out in August is what we received. There hasn't been an effect, and that was actually from the New Jersey Department of Agriculture. So as soon as they let us know that the eligibility criteria changed, I believe that I haven't received anything from that announcement. I'm not sure if that's actually a bill that the governor. Okay. And as of right now, NJDOE hasn't officially put out anything to schools on that. And also, whenever we get a notification from the New Jersey Department of Agriculture, it's something that then we could present to the board, whether to see what the impact will be and whether the board will be supporting that. As of right now, the board sponsors 100% every single family that does qualify, because we don't participate, we don't get the reimbursable dollars from the federal government on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more from the public? If not, we are going to officially close public session, and I need a motion. Oh, before we do a motion to close, I want to just, we did the addendum. I just wanted to say our next regularly scheduled meeting is Tuesday, October 11th, beginning with confidential session at 6 p.m. and our public session here in the High School Learning Commons at 7 p.m. I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Prisco, second by Mrs. Drappi, and I
Third.
need a verbal aye.
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 Aye, so aye. And we are officially adjourning the meeting. It is 8:23 and